all sorts of commercial archaeology, but we're looking at this one particular special site, which indeed got, as Jean's already said, you had a surprise when people opened up their newspapers or opened current archaeology up. This was a find which received local, national and international attention. I believe the news reports of the Harpole treasure went to almost 100 different countries, were translated into more languages that went further beyond that, was on so many social media websites, platforms, etc. So it really did went international. I did a interview for the Washington Post in America. One of my colleagues did a Hungarian newspaper, as he speaks Hungarian. So there we are. It really did go right across the globe. However, I am getting just a little bit ahead of ourselves. So let us rewind a little bit all the way to the start of this story, which is now a year and a bit old. And it was for some time that we had to keep this a little bit quiet. Nobody really wanted to let the cat out of the bag, as it were, until we knew as much information as we sensibly could, and then, bless you, and then release the information once we had it to the public. So let's go right back to the start. This was an incredible once-in-a-lifetime archaeological discovery, something that I never thought I would ever be involved with, something that was beyond my dreams, something that is, as Jean said, almost the elements of this are on a par with Sutton Hoo, and here it is, here in Northamptonshire, right by Northampton, in the village of Harpole. Fantastic. So, like all great finds, though, this was made by chance. Say, over a year ago now, but only just, MOLA had been commissioned by RPS Consulting on behalf of Vistry Homes to undertake some archaeological work on a new residential development just outside Harpole. The site we'd already undertaken geophysical survey on. So this is when we try and look beneath the soil with the walking frames that you may be familiar with from current archaeology or archaeological programs on television, that sort of thing. So done geophysical survey, and we have an idea of what we're going to find under the ground. The plan was revealed from the geophysical survey of enclosures. They looked like they were late Iron Age in date, a characteristic type that we're familiar with across this county, very much so. So we're expecting this Iron Age to maybe very early Roman sub-circular ditched enclosure. And there were some other accompanying ditches too, and some rubbish pits, probably for looking after livestock in unsecure months of the year, winter, autumn, that sort of time. And monitoring them, keeping them well in times of trouble equally. The enclosures are used for lots of different things. However, as you see, as Jean pointed out, the Harpole treasure made the cover of Current Archaeology, issue 395, and I am still pinching myself that happened. That was just fantastic. So let us move to our next slide, and this shows you the site. So it's a geology of clay, mostly right across the site, with some patches of sand and gravel, with the topography rising northwards from the south up to the north at the top of your screen, as we've got the image that you're looking at. So a slight gradual graduation of the slope. The two phases of ridge and furrow agricultural system, one aligned north to south, that's the yellow stripes going up and down, and we've got one going from east to west, those are the yellow stripes going across, and the pale blue gives you the location of the Iron Age enclosure, and it's got a little gully in the middle of it as well, and there's various other blue lines which are all late Iron Age, early Roman features that we found on the site, things that the geophysical survey had picked up. This green patch we see in the middle of the slide, this light green patch, is an area of either quarrying. Certainly during the excavation we believed it to be quarrying, particularly with this straight edge on the west hand side of the site. All seemed rather regular. However, now we are thinking that although we've got this regularity of shape on the west and south sides, we are leaning towards it actually being geology, having had tested it on site and done a little bit more research on this. So we have this splodge of green, very, very thick, blue, grey, gelatinous when it's wet clay. There is a brown rectangular sub-square feature that you see just overlapping that clay feature, and that is a brick footprint for a structure, a building. We had nothing else on the site other than that was modern. However, the feature that I will point out to you, which on this certainly does not look anything out of the ordinary, is as we have the top edge of the site, we have the green splodge just moving just off the north edge of the limit of our excavation. There is to the right hand side a diagonal blue linear line, a ditch, a feature coming across. And then there is a dark blue splodge just to the side with a hooked, slightly curving linear feature to the east. And I hope everybody can see that. That feature is the one we are going to be talking about very much this afternoon. It certainly, sorry, this evening, it certainly did not look anything unusual from the geophysical survey, and it certainly did not look anything unusual on the site once the topsoil and the subsoil had been stripped off and the archaeology was revealed as you see in plan here. So nothing out of the ordinary, nothing special. And that's often how many of these surprising archaeological finds start their story, something not unusual. So let us move along to the next slide, which shows you what the site really was like in a broad sense. It shows the site during excavation. We can see the rippling effect of the ridge and furrow that we can see running across the site from where the photograph's taken right to the green edge at the top of the photograph that you see there. And we can see someone working away with some sample buckets, taking some samples from a section they've dug. And in front of you, right in front of the camera, we've got a 2-meter scale and a typical section of through the main enclosure ditch. And you can see how clayey this site is. It was on occasions quite difficult for some of the diggers to really understand and visually see the difference between the archaeological fills and the natural geology. And it took quite a lot of experience work. We had some people of the team were inexperienced and were benefiting from working in this team. So there's a lot of hard work going on. So all credit to them for doing all this work and not getting a great deal of finds out of it. And to be honest, this is very much a lot of the bread and butter type archaeology that is being done by many of the commercial archaeological units. This sort of thing in late Iron Age, early Roman population expansion that we see across Britain. So this gives you an idea what the site was like. But then we had our surprise. On Monday, the 11th of April, 2022, the last week of field work, literally, it's always at the end of a site, isn't it? And just after lunch, the site supervisor began excavating that rubbish pit, as we assumed it was, on almost at the northern edge of the site. Not quite on the top of the hill, but certainly appeared to be a rubbish pit. We'd had a couple of them on the site, nothing special out of them. So the supervisor, Leventi Bellas, began excavating this rubbish pit. And at first there was nothing special, but as the depth increased, this pit became a little bit deeper than the others that we'd encountered on the site already. And the fill suddenly became very organic. That was very different. Feature then revealed some tooth crowns. That was all we had as our first indication that this was a human burial. Then the untarnished glint of treasure, of gold. Now, I can't tell you how that gives a different take on an excavation. Gold does not tarnish. So to remove soil and see bright, shiny metal right in front of you is a thrill you never forget. So this came up once in a lifetime, as I say. I've never had something like this before in my 30-odd year career. I then had a message to call Levente straight away. I was on another site, straight enough, dealing with another burial. And I got to site by 3 p.m. because I was the other end of the county. So at 3 p.m, I was standing next to him on the top of this rather windswept location, staring at him staring at me, team standing around, and I was comprehending the enormity of this burial significance, because the moment I saw this, I knew this was changing, earth-changing in its enormity in so many different ways. And various things were going rushing through my head like a steam train. Consultant, client, the resources to continue to undertake this, delays to the project, how this was going to be coped with and managed, and probably more importantly than anything else, the phone call I then had to do to my dear wife to say, I'm not sure what time I'm coming home. So thankfully, she is also an archaeologist, and very understandably, and was very excited and was hoping to hear more as the day unfolded, and when I eventually got home well after dark. This was indeed, as I call it, a day of days. It was exhilarating, it was thrilling, it was unbelievable, and very, very long. So here we see in the slide Levente's hand and a brush, giving a little bit of scale as we started to try and clean up and get an idea about what we had, how extensive it was, and what this really was meaning without getting ourselves involved on it. We didn't want to walk on it, we didn't want to touch it too much. We needed to get the necessary people there as quickly as possible. We got the consultant there, we got the client for the site there, not that day, but next couple of days. And we then very quickly also got conservation involved so that we could really ascertain what we really needed to do next. However, the priority on that first day was we had to lift these gold pieces. And there are several reasons why. I will mention that this is, we realized straight away the enormity, that this was probably going to be not just county, but very definitely national and probably international significance. That it was an Anglo-Saxon burial, which we had some teeth and we had some treasure. We didn't know how much at that point in time, but the locality of the find site was very, very close to a public footpath. And because the public footpath was in use, we were concerned about the security of the site, as you might imagine. And even now, we are not saying where exactly the find came from. We are still having so much work to do on the site and the area. The client does not wish the exact location to be known. So don't ask me for that, because I won't give it to you. However, we needed to lift the items that on that day. So a number of us stayed behind to make sure that was done. It took a little bit of effort, a little bit of time, but something so important and exciting and exhilarating and important for the county too it was a no-brainer, and all the team volunteered straight away, which was fantastic. All credit to them. So let us move along. So just a close-up of one of the photographs to just show you the environment compared to the clay you'd seen from the section earlier on, generally on the site. You can see we're not dealing with clay, we're dealing with very much organic material, black and brown deposits here, and there you've got a couple of the gold items in situ. This was the very first photograph I took with a scale after I'd finished panicking, to give an idea about what we had on the site to send to the consultant. There we go. So burial clearly contained organics, wood, as well as the necklace of gold and garnet, a square pendant, gold coins mounted for suspension, precious stones mounted in yet more gold, and a tiny carved face, absolutely tiny, almost the size of a hazelnut. Although the only human remains evident were these tooth crowns, there were also some curious iron strap-like fittings at the edges of the burial. Collectively, the client, the consultant, and MOLA took the decision, as I said, to lift as soon as we had completed as much of the recording as we could and was necessary for the safety of those objects and the safety of the archaeological remains. In fact, the site, I volunteered to stay overnight on the site. I made arrangements to sleep in my car very close to the site, just for security reasons. And in the end, though I did not, we did mount a cover, should we say. So we are right the way through the night. There were MOLA attendees on the site, so that if there had been any trespass, we would have been aware of it. But thankfully that did not happen, which is brilliant. So the next day, MOLA is very fortunate in having support from many experts across our organisation, and of course from the Museum of London itself. So on Tuesday morning, saw two conservators who had travelled very early up on a train, brought up to the site by one of our vehicles. Liz Goodman and Riva Butylikova set about examining and then preparing to block lift parts of the burial. 7 soil blocks were lifted in total. That is literally all of the burial that we had. Everything was block lifted, and everything above the organic layers, all of that material was sifted through and then processed on site. So through a sieve, through a series of sieves. So we know we've gone through every bit of the fill of all of this burial. We 100% excavated it, so we've got everything from it, which is really, really vital stuff. Very, very important to do this on something that we knew that the archaeological community, maybe even across the world, were going to be, when this news was released, observing and looking and seeing what we had done. So we have our conservators on site. They carefully lifted the soil blocks, which is not an easy process in a field with not particularly good access by any vehicle to it. And it was an entertaining issue to remove the soil blocks from the site, involving 4 of us carrying each soil block as if it was a wounded soldier upon a stretcher across the World War I battlefields, perhaps. But very careful we were bringing them down once they had been cut around the edges, as you see our 2 conservators working there, cutting around the edges of where we're going to block lift from, and then sliding boards. We were using nothing more complicated than thin metal plates to slide underneath. You can see in the block lift on the left hand side, and then wooden shelving boards, very flat, that we could then give some support and control over as we very carefully lifted them up. And a soil block is quite a heavy thing. They don't look too heavy, but literally they can weigh as much as a person if you've got enough soil in there. And these soil blocks were varied, but were on average about 2 inches in thick. So about 50 millimeters in thickness, about 2 inches thick. So there is a lot of compacted soil in there. And the idea, of course, was to take them back to Museum of London, where these soil blocks could be micro excavated in a laboratory with all the right conditions, all the experts that we needed to attend and to work on them without it being backbreaking. So you can sit at a bench rather than being in a wet hole. It's also, you don't have the rain on you. You can do it with artificial lighting. It really gives so much more control with it. So that was the idea, get all the scientific techniques that we could then bear upon it to get as much information out as possible. So there we've got our excavation as we were doing it. So here we can see, well, there is no body. We've got some teeth, but I will come to this later. And we've got a 1 meter scale. We can see a red and white stripe. Each of those is 50 centimeters. And we're looking from the head end closest to us to where the feet would be. And we can see in the slide 2 pots. We were very fortunate in other grave goods. So we have 2 complete Anglo-Saxon vessels in this burial, and one slightly smaller than the other. Both are decorated, and we're doing analysis on them now. I'm not going to say too much more about them. They're being looked at now. They may be local. However, there is a possibility that they may have come from a European site. They may have been an import. However, they are complete Saxon pots. They have been broken purely from the weight of the fill, the material that's been over them for 1,300 odd years. They were subject to block lifts as well. So that's fantastic. On the left-hand side of our image, we've got an Iron Age gully. The Saxon burial, the people who are attending this funeral, this service, this interment, would not have known that the site was a prehistoric, late Iron Age enclosure. They would not have known that the site had been used previously by anyone. That they dug through the Iron Age gully to the side of it, quite clearly cutting it in the work we've done. We've got that information. So it's interesting to see how this has all happened. And we've got one intrusive sherd of late Iron Age pottery from this Anglo-Saxon lady's burials upper fill. So we're going to try a film, and I hope you're enjoying this. So this just gives you a little bit more of context of what the site was like. So the white squares nailed into the ground are location points for photogrammetry, and we've photographed the burial and some of its surrounding natural geology in 3 dimensions so that we can produce a visual representation that can be rotated around. We haven't released this, we've done it, but we haven't released it yet because we want to do that in a little further down the time. We are going to provide more information. We are doing so much research work on this that we are tantalizingly going to release more details as further work progresses, which of course though does take a lot of time. However, you get an idea from the size of this. It's not a very big hole for a burial, for a person to be in. We are looking at a lady. So do remember that we're looking at what we believe, we're 98% certain that this was a lady, and from the information we have from the necklace, from the pots, we believe that she was buried between 630 and 670 AD. We may even be able to narrow that date down a little bit further doing more research, but at the moment we're working on this 630 to 670 date range, which in itself is quite significantly tight. This is because our metal fittings from this burial, we believe, are from a bed, and bed burials are significantly rare. We are looking at about 17 bed burials from the United Kingdom. So this really is going to be ranking right up there as an incredibly important piece of archaeological evidence for this significant period where females, where Anglo-Saxon high status women are buried with, very obviously with as high status, with jewelry, with necklaces, with grave goods. So very, very much an amazing thing, but I'm getting ahead of myself again. Those people who know me, I digress very well. I could digress for England. So we will move along to our next image. Now we've seen that slide, which gives you a bit more sort of three-dimensional view of what it was like. This dramatic picture I put in very principally to show a very key point about this burial's location. Although it was not on the highest point geographically or topographically of the site, the position of the highest point of the hill is further to the north. But there is a significant point from the compound where the contractors doing the building works, or were about to do building works, getting ready, and from a major road by Harpole, looking up from that lower valley position, that point where this lady was buried is visually the highest point on that hill. So we think it's significant that this location was chosen in advance for this interment. And it's a very dramatic one, with the clouds giving this very visual picture. And the inset there just showing the team working collectively so hard on this site to make sure that everything is recorded, everything is ready. You can see that wearing their protective equipment there. They've got the sample buckets. We've filled so many sample buckets. Unbelievable number. I forget, it's a huge number of sample buckets we have from this, as you may imagine, which has all been processed. So we will move to our next slide, which shows the archaeological plan, the illustration, which shows the image of the burial itself. We have the two pots, the brown area in between, which is some of the stained area. We have a subcircular, sort of suboblong little feature, which is in the middle to north part of the pit. And this we believe now to be some sort of not stake hole, post hole. We think that there was some sort of marker. We believe it to be, at this stage, as a working hypothesis, a wooden post. We don't know what form that wooden post took. We don't have any evidence of the post itself or its packing, but the significant part is that we had during the excavation this, what appeared at first to be just a slight undulation, a depression, but we now believe it to be some sort of marker, as if this burial was marked once it had been backfilled, once it had been finished, so people could see it. Now that makes a lot of sense now, but it's quite a rare thing to find some evidence of marking burials in this sort of period of history. Very rare indeed. So it's a working hypothesis. We still have so much more information to work on. This is a project which is going to go on for approximately another 5 years. So we've certainly got our work cut out with this, but this gives you an idea of the sort of layout. Little green dots that you see in the center of the image are all of the gold items that we had from the excavation. So I'm going to move on a little bit more now to the laboratory in the Museum of London. And we've got an image on our left-hand side of one of the soil blocks as it's been excavated in the laboratory. And what you can see here is a long linear thing on the left-hand side of the soil block, slightly curving. And this is human bone. This is part of the burial, the lady in question. It's part of her femur, part of her leg bone. Then we have a strange greenish circular tinge at the top to back part of this soil block. It's the slight depression you can just see that seems flatter than everywhere else. And this is a curious, see if I can just pull my arrow up and just, there we go. So hopefully you can all see that. That we now have discovered is copper. We believe it to be the last vestiges of a copper shallow dish or bowl. And we have, since this photograph was taken, we have exposed more of that to confirm this. And we have a rim which has survived much, much better than the rest of the vessel. It's very thin, but again, we're still working on all of this. There is a lot of cracked deposits on here, but much of this has now turned out to be human bone. We have now, as well as the femur coming across, we have a couple of ribs. They're all broken. We have two vertebrae out of place, and we have some finger bones. So we could confirm the artist illustration that we see on the right-hand side of that slide, showing our lady with her hands crossed across her pelvis, with the two pots in place, with their decoration on her bed. So we have principally shown this in a subdued form, as we are still working on all of the objects. So we're not exactly certain of the form of the bed yet. A lot more work to be done on that. She's shown in the artist illustration as well as wearing the necklace. However, it may be the necklace was not worn by her, but it may have been laid on top of her. We are waiting more work on this. It's a tricky thing to work out whether someone was wearing it or it was laid on top, because all we have is the necklace itself. And of course, the cord has decayed. She's laying on some sort of mattress, and we do strongly suspect that she was laid on a feather mattress and had some sort of pillow, some sort of cloth behind her. This is, again, really, really interesting scientific evidence that we've got from the analysis we're doing. There is organic material, we've got fabric, we've got textiles, and we believe we may also have organic remains that are possibly fur and possibly feather. That is pretty amazing stuff. So we're looking at all this at the moment. Let us move along. So, ongoing conservation. It's going on now, and it will be going on for the next few years. But we've done a certain amount already to get to a stage we're at now to assess all of this find from these lumps of soil that we've lifted out of the ground. So we know we have, with our necklace, which is made up of one cloisonne design gold and garnet rectangular clasp. This is a reused item. The back of it has a previous fitting, which indicates that it perhaps was part of a wrist clasp, perhaps not unlike the one from Sutton Hoo, though less large, less grand. So this is an example of an Anglo-Saxon individual being very green, very conservation minded, reusing an item as a necklace. As well as this, we have 4 garnet pendants set in gold. We have 5 glass pendants set in gold. We have 8 gold coin pendants and 12 gold wire spacers. And next to the amazing surprise of our burial and the value that shows the extreme care and value of doing such a conservation in the field as these block lifts. One of our blocks of soil has revealed a silver cross, and the garnet in the center of that cross is what you see in the main part of that picture. And the earbud just gives you a clear scale that although it isn't very big, it is a considerably large garnet. Remember, these garnets come from really, this is the likelihood is very strong that this is one of the garnets that has been traded right across from India. So this is something which is very special and unique. This has never such a thin silver cross backed by wood has never been found before. It was laid onto the body face downwards, and we are working on the hypothesis that this is a religious processional cross. If it is such, this will be probably the earliest from this country, if not the earliest we have from archaeology. So that in itself will be absolutely fantastic. And around there, we've got our Liz Barham in the blue denim jacket. She's the lead conservator on all this work. And then to the side, to the right-hand side, we have the consultant, Simon Mortimer from RPS, and we have David from Vistry Homes, who's the ultimate client. And so there we have our necklace. On the right-hand side, as found, but photogrammetrically arranged as it would have been worn. And then on the left-hand side, a version to show you what it would have been like when it was worn. And the first thing that people always notice, it's asymmetrical. All of the similar necklaces or jewelry found from such similar bed burials or high status female burials have been found previous to this in antiquity many years ago. And there has been an assumption that the necklaces are symmetrical because we're used to jewelry in our time being symmetrical. But here's a thought: this isn't symmetrical. So we have a load of research questions all about this. Are these pendants and items on the necklace something to do with rank, position? Are they things that have to be earned? Do they have more significance than we just see them as high status? Is there much more to this? All these questions we are going to be very excitingly looking at. So the wider context, the Harpole burial fits into a group of elite female bed burials, broadly dated between 630 and 680. And Our Lady may be in the middle to the end of this group of European elite female burials. Several of them, quite many of them really, have Christian religious symbolism. And bed burials have been found mostly in 2 broad groups. There are 5 from Wiltshire and 6 from the Cambridgeshire or Suffolk area, although there's 1 each from Yorkshire and Derbyshire. And it could be seen that this Northamptonshire, the Harpole burial, could be another outlier like the Yorkshire and Derbyshire example. Most are young women, and certainly all of them seem to be female, which is why we're pretty certain the Harpole lady was a lady. Although we are going to be working on ancient DNA to see if we can extract that and confirm this. So we've got a reconstruction here from the Yorkshire example from Redcar. This is one from their museum. So it gives you an idea about what she may have looked like, just a visual idea, in a simple bed with a mattress in her finery. Of course, we need to remember the Harpole necklace is rather grander than the Redcar example, but just gives us a bit of an idea what we might be looking at with our Lady and with this incredibly special find. There are 14 definite and 4 possible other bed burials found in England. Notable example, we've got Trumpington, Cambridgeshire, others across Wiltshire, Suffolk. And there is a suggestion that these women were certainly very high status in the church, and they might have been abbesses or deaconesses. But many of them are also not connected with a physical location of a church or a nunnery. They're buried on their own, almost seemingly in the middle of nowhere, sometimes on a high point, but not always. So the open rural landscape where the Harpole lady was buried certainly fits into this pattern of high status female burials in a location which is connected to, perhaps, but nowhere near a religious building or structure. They may have had a mound over it, and indeed the Harpole burial may have had a mound. This is something that we're going to work on further archaeology in the area, because such a mound may have been 20 meters diameter. We have an extra burial on the site too, which may be the same sort of time as this lady, though perhaps a little later, and may indicate a burial on the edge of the mound covering the Harpole lady. However, because this burial was found as a surprise, we weren't looking for a mound, and there was certainly no evidence archaeologically that we found during the works before the discovery of the Harpole lady, or afterwards. We couldn't see anything after we had done that. However, it is a working hypothesis that there may have been a mound, and we'd like to either prove or disprove that with some future work. Again, this is why we don't give the location away. And of course, such a mound, as well as perhaps the marker that may have been there too, would have been a significant visual point that people would have known about and seen, until at some point the post perhaps marking it was taken down, maybe knocked down in a storm, maybe it rotted, and the mound would eventually be ploughed out if there was a mound. So there is a lot of time this burial became forgotten about. Just to give you an idea about some of the other bed burials across Europe, each of these dots gives a location from a study recently published by Emma Brownlee in 2022. Although it came out after the Harpole burial was discovered, Brownlee was not party to our knowledge, and so the Harpole burial is not on this map. However, this does just give you an idea about the distribution of other bed burials in the United Kingdom, but also in Europe. And you can see there are a bit of a grouping: North Germany, and 1 or 2 in some of the Scandinavian countries too. Other than that, England does seem to have quite a number. And of course, many of these were excavated in antiquity. The Harpole burial is the only one in other than the Trumpington burial in recent times that it's been excavated with modern archaeological techniques, using scientific technology, using the ability of ancient DNA as we're working on with this. So there's so much more that we can do with this as a find from recent times. So we've got our bed burial, and just to give you an idea about what the bed may or may not be like. Well, we've only got these iron fittings to work on, but we do have very small fragments of wood from the soil block lifts. In fact, this now has given us the information that we have more wood from the bed of the Harpole burial than we've had from any other English bed burial before. So we're hoping to really use that to our advantage and find out more about the wood itself. The Swallow Cliff Down bed burial was inserted into a Bronze Age barrow found in the 60s, but here we've got a reconstruction of the bed, young female buried on it, and the bed was believed to be of ash wood with some elaborate iron fittings. Now, we don't have the elaborate iron fittings that give the headboard and the side panels, but we have the fittings that go along the sides of the boards, which would have supported some sort of lattice cloth crosswork, i.e. the thing that supports your mattress, the webbing straps that we're familiar with from more modern beds. So that is those are the metal fittings that we have. Other bed burials from other places. So we've got the Trossingen bed burial found in Germany, Cologne Cathedral bed burial, but no wood has survived other than impressions from our English examples, apart from the Harpole one. I've got on the slide there, it may reveal wood. I can confirm we have got, although they're very small, we do have very small pieces of wood from this. So that's absolutely fantastic. So these were simple plank construction beds, nothing complicated, but from these pictures, of course, you can see that they are fairly decorated. They're high status pieces of furniture. We've worked with Museum of London and a number of other organisations to obtain good digital x-rays of all of our small finds from the site, and they show these iron bed fittings. You can see them on the digital x-ray on the right hand side there. They don't appear very interesting initially, although the x-rays do tell us a little bit more about how they're produced, which is really, really useful. And the Harpole burial bed fittings appear to be this double bifurcated cleat type. So we have a complete bed made of two horizontal boards joined by these cleats, similar to the Street House Farm example from Yorkshire. Now, Yorkshire is an outlier of these two main groups found in the United Kingdom, and it may be that the Harpole is seen as another outlier, and it may be there are more comparisons with the Yorkshire example as we're working through. So we've got a lot more work to do, and it is slower than you might imagine. It really is slow. But at the end of all of this, hopefully we'll have as complete a picture as we can get of this lady, when she died, what she was buried with, all sorts of information like that, which is so exciting for such a local, so close to Northampton find. So we have our 8 gold coins from the necklace. These are solidi, made for the Emperor Theodosius I, AD 379 to 395. So these are late Roman, or so they appear. These coins are very rare in England, so it's more likely that these are, in fact, copies of Theodosius I's solidi, and not actually the solidi themselves. And this is the largest group of coins from such a necklace to be found. The shaping of the loop on the top of these shows the coins, on this example, shows the coin's reverse face. And all of the coins, the fittings have been applied so that it's the reverse of the Theodosius I solidi that's being displayed outwardly. That is, we're not sure of the significance, but it certainly is significant. The 12 biconical gold wire beads, so not very big, as you see, although the central bead is a little bit larger, but they're typically mid-7th century style. All but one are plain, the other being made of beaded wire. So you can see the wire that's been produced to make this bead. Beaded one, it appears to have little blobs along each of the rows. So that's very beautiful. Possibly another element of recycling being seen here. The glass making up some of the pendant sparkle that we have will be subject to scientific analysis. Haven't done it yet, working on it. This will examine the chemical composition in detail using laser ablation inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, or LAICP-MS for short. Thankfully, it's a short version, although I have difficulty remembering that. This has the glass from the necklace. Has it been reused? Has it been recycled maybe from Roman glass? Or was this newly produced glass in the 7th century? We want to find this out. So we're going to have a bit of a go at this. One possibility that we have is one or two of these have a beautiful twisted design. They appear to have different coloured glass being used in the pendant. We want to see whether there is a theory from one of our glass experts that it's reusing an Iron Age bead within the glass pendant. So fusing an Iron Age bead, so melting it and fusing it inside another piece of glass to then make the pendant. If so, that would be really, really special. But it is, again, something we need to test. There we've got one of these very beautiful glass pendants that you can see the fusing of different coloured twisted rods of glass on this one, as excavated, still joined to one of the gold solidi there. Absolutely amazing. And then that strange tiny head that I mentioned, that face right at the start, this really awakened all our interest, because something like this had never been seen before. We have now two of them, in fact. They are, we now know, made of silver, very thin silver, and they have blue glass settings for eyes. And we think one of them, well, the one that I'm not showing you, is still attached to that silver cross we have in the block lift that is still being worked on and hasn't come out of the block lift left. So this is the one that we found on the site on the first day. So we think they were on the terminals of two arms at least of the silver cross, and it may be that we've got another one, maybe another two in that soil block lift. However, it is painstaking work at micro excavating, and it's so tempting to rush and get the information from the bling, from the amazing objects, but we have to be very methodological about it. We have to be very concentrated in our procedures, in our way we excavate. So we'll get there, but it's taking time. There's just an X-ray that shows you the gold pendants. This is the entire necklace, the beads, the solidi, all X-rayed, just to make sure that we understand as much about them as possible. There's that silver cross. The red garnet that we saw earlier, I find it amazing that it has a piece of gold foil behind it. If you think of a breakfast cereal, a shreddy that you might be aware of, it's a gold shreddy behind that red garnet. And when the light is directed upon it, it's hard to get a photograph of, but the gold shreddy reflects the light back through the back of the garnet at you viewing it, and looks absolutely stunning. Amazing thing. Again, this is also something which we see in the Sutton Hoo workmanship of some of the gold and garnet items there, particularly the wrist clasp from the Sutton Hoo burial. So much connotation. Sutton Hoo burial and the tradition of men being buried in extravagant ways is right before this period of women being buried with this high status, high religious connection, and then it dies out, say, about 680. So we've got very clear lineage. And then right after the Harpole burial has been interred in the ground, just after that we have, and overlapping it very slightly, we've got the Staffordshire hoard. So we've got the Harpole burial almost bookended, or benchmarked if you like, by two nationally well-known treasure items from this country. Absolutely incredible. Couldn't have asked for something so amazing in my wildest dreams. So we're on to our next slide. The closest comparative we have to the necklace from Harpole is from Northamptonshire. Amazingly, even more so. Adds to the incredible level this is. The Desborough necklace, closest comparative from our county, The original on display at the British Museum and there's a replica in the Desborough Heritage Centre. But it doesn't have any coins. It has many more elements, but they're much smaller, and each is interspaced by one of these biconical beads. However, we have a little bit of a slight problem. This was a find from antiquity. It's been found in well over 100 years ago. And the workmen who found it all kept the different elements themselves. So the British Museum are not certain they acquired all of the elements to the necklace. And of course, naturally, they have presented it in a symmetrical fashion. But this is really significant that we've got two of these very important high status burials from Northamptonshire. So, broad research questions. What now? What are we doing now about it a year on? Well, at the moment, we're in the assessment phase of the work. We're assessing all of the information. We're trying to complete all of the micro excavation of the block lifts. Now, there are 7 of those, and we plan to do that by maybe October, November of this year. We will have taken samples of the soil, of the material. We have been doing so all the way along, and we will have by that time as well have allowed some of our specialists that need to have access to this material to come and take their own samples too. So we're making sure that we are covering every possible aspect. So we want to find out maybe if we can get an idea who this lady may have been. Some people have already put up suggestions, and I won't say yet because they've put suggestions of people up, and then other people have said why that person can't be it because they're too early or too late, or they died in another part of the country, or they in fact were married to somebody else, and all these sorts of things. It may be that we will never find out who she definitely was, but even if we could find maybe a couple of possibilities of who the Harpole lady could have been, that would be absolutely fantastic. Was she English? Was she Frankish? Was she Anglo-Saxon, as we term it? I know we also using late medieval as a term, but was she a non-English person, or was she from England by birth? We want to find that out. Was she Scandinavian or from another European country? What was her status when she was alive? Could she be a member of a royal family? Was she a princess, a queen even? Or was it a religious status that her wealth is reflecting only? How does Harpole relate to other bed burials as well? That's really important. And how does Harpole relate to other Northamptonshire Anglo-Saxon sites? We've had some very exciting Anglo-Saxon artifact-rich burials from Overston to the northeast of Northampton. So they're a little bit earlier, but how all that fits together as an Anglo-Saxon jigsaw puzzle. And what does Harpole burial tell us about Christianity and the role of women in the church is a really, really big thing. We know these groups of female burials at this time absolutely really significant. And if we can get some really good new information, as we are already getting from the Harpole burial, but if we can use that to give a better understanding about women in archaeology at this period where there is so little to go on anyway, really, really key. So was the burial lined with fur or fabric? We certainly have an idea that we have fur and fabric, and once we get some professional scientific assessment done, we will be able to confirm hopefully that. We're confident, quietly confident. Was there bedding? We think there was. Were there textiles? Yes. A duvet or mattress material, something that she was lying on with organics, definitely. We also think there was some sort of protective canopy, something over the top of our burial. When you bury somebody, even a pet, you don't really want to put the soil down straight on top of them. That's almost disrespectful. It doesn't seem right. So certainly we think there may have been something over the top. And the evidence from the human remains does indicate that there was a cavity between our our deceased lady, and the soil above. Certainly to begin with, I won't go into details because it's a little bit gruesome, but we think there's certainly a cavity, some structure protecting the lady. So really amazing. And then we've got one of the pieces of the broken pots there, showing you the decoration, and the digital X-ray there showing you the pots. Unfortunately, the digital X-ray isn't showing us that the pots have any residue or anything inside them that we can tell from these X-rays, but we are going to be micro-excavating them anyway. Well, the process has already been started on one of them. So if there is any contents, if there is any residues we can get, that we're pretty certain they don't look like they contained any food or liquids, but we're going to test for it anyway and see what we can find. And then to close with, before we move to questions, just a lovely photograph just showing a little bit of detail of that pendant right at the front. This was supported by a loop on the top, as you see there, but the loop is missing. It's got 3 elements to it, but it's missing 3 other elements. So it must have had a rod and been part of some sort of hinge, like a wrist clasp or other piece of jewelry, and it's been reused as a pendant. Yeah. So there we are. We've come to the end. For me, it feels like 5 seconds of showing you these amazing things through these pictures and a little bit of film. But I hope this has given you an insight, and I'm very